Margaret Atwood's fame as a novelist rests on her amazing ability to act as our scout, exploring terrain before we get there, the emerging landscape of feminism and post-feminism in novels like Surfacing, Bodily Harm, and Lady Oracle, and then in The Handmaid's Tale, her best-known novel, the future that religious fundamentalists would like to prepare for us. Her latest novel, Cat's Eye, scouts the most personal terrain yet, the deepest recesses of childhood. In telling the story of Elaine Risley, a successful painter who returns to Toronto for a retrospective of her work and in the process relives a haunted childhood, Margaret Atwood comes closer than she's ever done before to exploring the sources of her art. Margaret, your new book, Cat's Eye, comes with what looks like almost a sort of government health warning, like the one you find on a pack of cigarettes. It says, "This is a work of fiction. Although its form is that of an autobiography, it is not one." Now that's puzzling stuff. It is an autobiographical piece of fiction, so what's the balance between fictional and autobiographical elements in the book?
Well, that was almost a direct steal from Alice Munro, who put the same thing at the front of Lives of Girls and Women. And I think I put it there because with every single one of the 6 novels I had written previously, people thought it was the story of my life, including The Handmaid's Tale that was set in the future. And I guess you can't win, but I thought this time I would put it boldly in black and white that it is a novel.
And why is it that novelists don't like admitting the autobiographical content of their fiction?
I think it's because they take pride in their craftsmanship and their artistry. They are making something. They're not just sitting down and spewing forth a stream of consciousness straight from their own life. They are fashioning something. I use real places, but my characters are a mixture of pastiche and invention, as with all novel writing, and the plot is fictitious.
But those discrepancies aside, it's very much the history of your generation, in a sense.
That's different. Saying it's your generation is quite different from saying it is your actual life. Or to point out another discrepancy from real life, I'm not a painter. The character in the book is. I never had a flaming affair with a Middle European art teacher. My female interviewers say, unfortunately.
But
I was not married to a conceptual artist. None of these things are true.
But you may have felt the loneliness and terror of being victimized as a child. That's straight out of your guts.
Everybody who has interviewed me has also done, including the men. I think this is just, it is childhood. Either one was that child at times, and I think children change roles in that a lot, or one was the person doing it, or one was peripherally involved in some way, because that is what children do.
Well, let's look at that, because it's one of the central mysteries of the book, one of the most haunting parts of it, which is that Elaine, the central character as a young girl, lets herself be tormented in a psychological way by another character, Cordelia, and by her band of little girls. And I kept wondering with great personal anguish why we let it happen.
I think because children are children and they're innocent, and they have not yet realized that children think that everything that happens to them is normal, and that is the way life is. So if this is happening to them, it must be the way life is. And it's not until they become adults and they realize that other people have other ways of living their lives, that they realize that they had a choice, or that this was not, if your father, for instance, beats you up every day, you think that that's what happens. And when you grow up and you meet other people who did not get beaten up every day, you think, this was not right. This did not have to be this way. But children think everything that happens to them is just life.
One of the things that Cat's Eye talks about is how truly horrible little girls can be towards each other.
Well, and some people have said, does this mean that you think little girls are worse than little boys? And the answer, of course, is no. It's just that the book is about little girls, and I think their methods are different. Little boys, I think, the action is much more overtly physical. They will beat each other up. And the
whereas
lines
with girls,
between,
it's mind games.
It's mind games, it's manipulation, and the lines of allegiance, I think, are much more clearly drawn with boys. This is my enemy, this is my friend, this is my gang. We're going to beat up this other gang. Whereas with little girls, your best friend one week can be somebody who isn't speaking to you the next week, and you don't know why. And if you think this behavior stops at the age of 12, you're quite wrong.
No. Okay, and it goes into adult life, and one of the ways in which the book has been read is as a rather sardonic commentary on a certain sentimentality in feminist circles about female friendship. You show that power, competitiveness, envy, and hurt are as built into female friendships as into male. Is that a fair extrapolation of this story?
Sort of fair, or let us put it this way. Why should women be gooder than men? Why should we even expect them to be gooder? I think expecting women to be more angelic than men is simply putting yet another impossible burden upon them. Women are human beings, and they behave as human beings behave, which is not always perfectly.
No better nor worse than men.
Differently.
Differently.
And men on the whole behave worse, I'm sorry to say, because men make war, and the book is set, it begins in the war, and war continues throughout it, but war is the surround.
But don't you set up an interesting contrast between Elaine, the central character's very strong relationship with her brother? In some ways, it's the most sympathetic male character you've ever drawn. And does it represent some coming to terms with men that you haven't expressed before in your fiction?
Well, I haven't dealt with that kind of character before, but I think there's also a tendency for people reading a book by a woman to think that any man in it who has so much as a hangnail or one single pimple,
or an unraveling sweater.
Yes, that the author is being unsympathetic to men, if she's a woman. Men can say all the bad things they like about men and nobody will blink. It was Shakespeare who created Iago, it wasn't me.
Okay.
So it's the ethnic joke factor. I think it's all right for Irishmen to make jokes about the Irish, but if anybody else does it, then that's mean. So it's all right for men to say bad things about men and for women to say bad things about women. But heaven help you, if you create an evil female figure, you'll be a misogynist.
I wonder, in the book, one of the things that the character does, which is very affecting and very dramatic, is to rethink her childhood as a source of all that inspires her. A lot of her paintings come out of images of her childhood, recreating these egregious, terrible characters, or these characters that she's loved. And childhood serves as this kind of bright place where all the kind of brightness of her imagination sprung. Is that how you see your own childhood?
I think that's what childhoods are. And the more you read, for instance, about the lives of people like Dickens, who is one of my heroes, a lot of his very powerful imagery came from his own childhood. Not that he then replicates it, blacking bottle for blacking bottle in his work, but the emotions and the experiences that he had as a child gave a sort of propelling fuel to.
Do you feel
his writing.
similarly propelled?
Sometimes I do. In a book like this, of course, there are connections. In a book like The Handmaid's Tale, I would say not. That it's some other area of energy that I'm drawing on. But you don't get energy for your writing just from yourself. It does come from other places. And it can either come from
childhood,
not just from childhood, not just from inside. There is a real world. You do have encounters with it. You do have responses to it as an adult.
I'm just wondering whether I can now come clean and tell you I love the book. And one of the reasons I love the book is it restored my own suburban Toronto childhood to me, restored it from amnesia. And I'm wondering whether the effect of writing the book was to restore to you your own childhood, even though this is fiction, granting you that it's fiction.
I think it was already there. I have one of those unfortunate memories. They're unfortunate for other people because, in fact, I remember in detail and quite a lot. So I think I had that era of time available to me, although when I was writing the book I found that I did have to go back and check, for instance, when plastic garbage bags came in, replacing soppy newspaper, when it stopped being cinders that were sprinkled on the road.
And somehow these facts somehow trigger the memory, trigger the return of that forgotten past for you.
They aren't a trigger in the book, they are a content of the memory. But I think one of the things that happens to us in childhood is that we attach emotions to objects. So that if you were, for instance, particularly happy in a certain location, you may remember with great clarity a garden swing or a pond, and you will be able to almost see that, and you will have the same emotion that you had then. Similarly with unhappy childhood events.
You talked earlier about sources outside childhood in your inspiration as a writer. In Canada, you're a famous figure. You're a political figure as well as a cultural figure. You've been associated with political struggles of various kinds, which in some sense have fed into your writing. Your most recent campaign has been the campaign against free trade. Now, can you explain, for the sake of an audience who won't be able to figure out why a writer should get in the free trade fight, a sort of economic fight, why a writer like you thought it was such a central issue for you to be involved in?
You don't get in, you get pushed in.
What pushes you?
One of the reasons you get pushed in is that in a debate like that, there are very few people who have the freedom to say what they think. Why is that? Because they have jobs. And particularly in a political debate which is so economically based, business people, lawyers, accountants, people like that simply did not have the freedom to say publicly what they thought, or they would have either been fired or they would have lost business.
So you're free, you want to use your freedom to say something. What's at cultural stake here?
I think what's at cultural stake, what is at stake in general, is the survival of Canada as an independent country. And
why?
Why? Well, picture yourself as being part of a nation which contains 25 million people, right next to the largest, to the most powerful, still the most powerful nation on earth, which contains over 10 times your own population and which has absolute access to you across the border. Now, we have been able to...
Canadians watch 40 American television channels, for example.
We watch a lot of American television. We have a great many American magazines come up, a great many American books, a great many American films. And out of this complete domination, we've been able to hack and hew a small ice cube of things that are Canadian.
And in the middle of that
produced.
ice cube is you.
And in the middle of the ice cube is me, frozen in time. So what we are not
preserving
talking
that
about,
ice cube.
preserving the ice cube, small though it may be. And of course the Americans say, well, this is not, we're not talking about culture, we're talking about the entertainment business, is what they call it. And we want, free access to the entertainment business, which is more or less what they've got.
And what you're saying is you're emphatically not in the entertainment business.
I may be partly in the entertainment business, but I don't think of it just as a business. Nor do I think that the same rules should or do apply to it as apply to the sale of toothpicks. You know?
Thank you, Margaret Atwood.